All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rachel Jen Carney. I am the staff liaison to the Winter Hill Civic Advisory Committee. And we have, I just want to do a quick attendance of the group, just to check microphones and everything as well. If everyone could just try saying their name, and we'll just go, I'll read down the list of who is here, and then if you can just practice saying your name. And just to double check, since it's been a while since we were on the platform, the microphone is the second icon just under the orange square with the arrow, and the camera is the one just under that. So first we'll go to Edith.
Hi, I'm Edith Bach.
And then Jake Wilson.
Hi, Jake Wilson here at City Hall.
All right, excellent. Microphones are working. Next, I see Jesse Klingen.
Good evening, all. Glad to be here.
Michelle Thompson. Michelle, we're not hearing you, so I will take a look and just see, just in case I'm missing anything in the directions. But if you're listening in, fantastic, and hopefully we'll be able to hear you soon. You can also always email me if you're struggling with the connection. Andrea?
Hi, I'm here.
Excellent. Rashika?
Hi, I'm here, Yoshiko.
And Will?
Checking in from Bon Air Street. Hello.
Excellent. Did I miss anyone? And we have Tom Galagani from the city staff as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And let's see. I hope everyone can see our agenda for this evening. So we have a pretty packed agenda tonight. We'll try and move quickly through these first few things so we can spend the most time with the team from Mark Development and Beacon Properties, who are going to give an introduction to their proposals and their plan for 299 Broadway. But first, of course, on our list is to check in and see if we have any members of the public who would like to speak. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak? If you could use the raise hand function or type a question into the chat. All right, seeing none, I do see a note from Josh Cohen at Beacon Properties that they are in attendance and standing by. Okay, but I believe that is it for public questions at the moment. So next thing on our agenda, I just wanted to touch base with everyone who was able to attend our site walk. It was a little dreary that day, but we did have a good group out there taking a look at the site, and I wanted to just sort of record for posterity any reflections anyone had based on the walk that we went on, things that you noticed, things that you thought about later after being out there.
Something that what jumped out to me the most was how tall the retaining wall is between the Star Market parking lot down to Sewall Street, and just worrying about what Mark Development will do for flood mitigation, because our areas tend to flood a lot anyway. So if more water is routed down to lower level properties, what's going to happen?
I would add to what Edith said, and I remember that several of us were sort of surprised at the grade of the kind of that area going towards the retaining wall as well. Not sure that many of us had noticed that previously, and I think that adds to those concerns.
One of the things that stood out to me, I tried to collect a couple of the pictures I had, which down at the bottom, was the condition of the electrical equipment. This photo at the top, let's see if I can blow it up a bit bigger, of Sewell Street. I think one of the things that everyone pointed out was like, goodness, those lines are leaning a little bit. So I can add that note as well if folks would like. Any other notes before we move into the next piece? We can always go back. I think one of the things that's really stood out also is just how large the property is. I think it was another thing, a comment I heard a few people say was like, goodness, there's a lot of space in this property and a lot of nooks and crannies with the different edge pieces, especially the one we were looking at Grant Street. I remember a lot of people kind of commenting on that little segment behind the dentist's office. The folks were sort of surprised. It didn't read immediately as part of the site.
Also, one of the things I just like remembering someone was talking about was noticing how people are using and crossing the street and how we respond to that. And the street is, I think Broadway was, yeah, how are people crossing and how is what they're creating going to respond to that and create spaces according to that.
I think that was, we were noticing there's that little like patch of pavement at the, I don't remember where exactly, but as people were crossing to get to the shops.
Yeah, that reminds me as well. We were discussing how I'm not sure that this is necessarily part of the property, but but immediately adjacent, the sidewalk on that side of Broadway along the side of the Star Market was surprisingly wide compared to other portions of the Broadway sidewalk. And it includes the area where there are benches. So it's quite a large space that would, in my opinion, would ideally be taken into consideration as you know the adjacent space is being developed. And it seems like an opportunity.
The note someone had just now about crossing, the other one I was noticing, remember we saw someone who actually did use the staircase through. So we did see that movement of people coming through the site and down the stairs.
In speaking with another member of the community, they pointed out that the area where those stairs connect to is currently a parking lot, and it seems like a decent sized parking lot, maybe not relative to the parking lot in the larger area of the property, but currently it seems to be totally unutilized parking spots that's closed off.
Okay, these are great observations. Thank you all so much. If there's anything else, let me know, but if not, we will turn the microphone over to the Mark Development and Beacon Properties teams, if that's all right with everyone. I see some nodding. For folks who aren't on camera, feel free to speak up if you have anything you'd like to add. I have a hand raised from Mr. Dash, who is the attorney for the team. So I'm going to give him the microphone next, and we will sort out how to allow them to share screens. So Adam Dash, I'm going to unmute you. You have to unmute yourself as well with this one.
Thank you, Rachel. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Probably want to unmute as well. I'm going to kick this off real quickly and then turn it over to the team. You probably want to unmute Robert Korf and Tim Love and probably Mr. Cohen, Josh Cohen. And I think Tim may be sharing slides, so that giving him the capability. In the meantime, let me just introduce myself. I'm attorney Adam Dash. I'm at 48 Grove Street here in Davis Square, and I represent Mark Development LLC, which is who's looking to redevelop the 299 Broadway and 15 Temple Street site, which you know is the old Star Market site, into a mixed-use development. There have been a number of neighborhood meetings, which some of you may have attended. Now the development team would like to walk you through where we are at the moment with the project affordable dwelling unit mix with the Beacon Communities as a partner. So, I can turn on my camera. Hi. So yeah, we'd like to talk about that, and I would like to now turn it over to the principal from Mark Development, Robert Korf. Robert?
And Robert, Tim, and Josh, you should all have the ability to turn your cameras on as well now.
Can you see me?
Can you hear me, Rachel?
I can hear you, but I can't see you at the moment.
Oh, hold on, share my webcam. How about now?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you, Adam Dash, for the introduction. We're excited to be here tonight, talking to the working group, the CAC group, and we've been very excited, anxious to get in front of you and begin this dialogue and collaborative effort here to come up with what we think is a super exciting project. I'm not going to bore you all with the details as to what's been going on the past year. I'm going to make the assumption that people have sort of been following the process, but we can certainly during the Q&A, address any questions as to how we arrived at the plan we arrived at. With me tonight is Tim Love, who's the lead architect from UTEAL and master planner for the project. And I'm happy to introduce our new partner for this project, who's come on board in the past couple of months, Josh Cohen from Beacon Communities. I think what I'd like to do really is not listen to myself talk a lot here tonight, because I want to hear from you all and just have some back and forth and get to know one another and hear, all your thoughts and comments. But before we do so, I'm just going to turn it over to Tim Love. We put together just, very quick presentation here to kind of walk you through how we see this project at this moment in time, mostly from the ground level. And I hope you all are as excited about it as we are. And without further ado, I turn it over to Tim. Tim?
Great, and I'm going to share my screen in a minute. This is the first time I've ever used the GoToWebinar, so my Mac might ask weird questions. My name is Tim Love. I'm the founding principal of UTEAL, and I'm an architect and urban planner. And this project's been a blast so far. And we're going to give you a synopsis of a little bit of our process, but show you where we've landed in terms of the design of the public realm and the way the ground floor spaces connect to it. And I think that this is precisely where we want to get your feedback and get you involved and keep you involved with the project. So, open system preferences, okay. Security and privacy. Click to make changes. Okay, sorry, it's my Mac is making me do some. Okay, I think I'm in now. Will not be able to record the contents of your screen until it is quit. Quit and reopen, okay. Restart or quit, go to webinar. I might have to come back.
Sorry, our GoToWebinar is a unique platform. It has its pros and its cons. On the pro side, you're allowed to zoom in. On the con side, every computer looks different, and we are struggling a lot with folks who are calling in by phone. So, Michelle, I'm working on that now. And I'll send you a quick email.
May I ask, do you have a full assembly of the CAC committee? I haven't.
Oh, yes, we do not. We are missing a few.
So if I look, at the list of people on here, anybody that is a panelist that isn't part of my team, would they be members?
Correct. So our attending tonight, we have Councillors Jake Wilson and Councillor Jesse Klingon, Edith Kwok, Andrea Duarte, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing everyone's names totally poorly, Michelle Thompson, Rusika Dewan, Will Cullen are all attending from the group.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't miss anyone. But we are missing a few members tonight.
Great, can everybody see my screen now?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, sorry about that. I had to set up system preferences. So it's great to hear that the group went to the site, because the site is both, I think, the biggest challenge of the project and also the biggest opportunity, because the topography, the stormwater issues, and the site grading issues have had a big impact on a lot of the decisions we've made on alignments and the three-dimensionality of the project. And you have to visit the site to understand it. And I've been back 5 times and walked around with each iteration we've done, just to eyeball relationships between existing grade, the backyards on Sewell, and grades that we're thinking about for the buildings. And I think that should be something in future conversations as we discuss aspects of this project with you and in public in general, we always come back to. This is an older site plan. It's an illustrative site plan from a public meeting we had, almost a year ago, but the principles are the same. The general concept of the project from a public realm standpoint is that we have a plaza facing Broadway. We called it a square once. It skews more to hardscape. It's really designed to allow the retail spaces on the ground floor of those buildings that are defining it to spill out into it. There's then a muse, a pedestrian walkway that connects back to a public park on Sewell Street that whose design has changed a little bit, but the logics are the same. It's mostly green, and it does a very important job of negotiating the grades so that from the plaza on Broadway all the way to Sewell Street, we have a very gentle, accessible path that is never steeper than a 5% slope that runs all the way from Broadway all the way to Sewell, partly because, like some of you, when I've been to the site, I've seen people get off the bus on Broadway, cut through the parking lot, take the stair to the small parking lot in Sewell, go through the fence and cut through that way, because it's a shortcut rather than walking up Broadway to Temple and heading down the hill on Temple Street. So that seemed very interesting to us as a way to really charge the project from a kind of activation standpoint. You'll also see that while the project has changed some, the building form is then, in addition to the muse and the plaza, the building form is also defined by 2 courtyard spaces that are a little bit more private and will have a little bit more of a backyard-like feeling. It's really that dumbbell between the plaza and the public park that's really central to the scheme. This is an updated site plan. We're very much working in AutoCAD to work through very specifically the grading issues and how they work. You'll see spot elevations on this plan, which I'll come back and talk to in a couple of minutes. And we've been refining the distribution of the retail spaces, how the lobbies to the buildings work, where we have ground level residential units that face the muse and then face some of the quieter spaces on the back. And we have an arts and culture space along Temple Street. It's also worth pointing out that there's no basement to this project, and we're not providing any on-site parking. So you'll see where bikes are labeled in this location and this location. All of the bike parking that's required is at grade and easily accessible for the people that live there. So we see that actually as a feature of this project, that it's going to be a great place to live if you're a cyclist or you commute by bicycle every day, because you'll be able to literally go on the ground floor, get your bike, and exit directly out. And so that's the logic too. I'm going to have Robert now talk about the development partnership that was set up a little bit to explain some of the programmatic aspects of the building overall. Then I'll come back and talk about the retail spaces and the landscape and how the grading has become, in a way, our guidepost for making all kinds of interesting design decisions. So I don't know, Robert, if you and Josh want to say a few words.
Yeah, sure. I'll just say that, as an overall here, the premise of this development and the way it's evolved has landed us in a place where again, we're very excited here, because we took an unfortunate site condition that didn't allow us to proceed with this project with any on-site parking, and found a way to make sense of it by bringing in more affordability basically to this project. And depending on the metric you use or the way you measure affordability, I like to look at this project as based on the rentable square footage that's being provided rather than unit count, because the affordable units, which are going to be on the left-hand side of this site plan, are going to be, for the most part, larger units leaning more towards 2 bedrooms, whereas the right side, which is the market rate units, will be the smaller type units. So if you measure by net square footage, we're probably somewhere in the area of 55, 45%, 45% being the affordability component, as opposed to what's typically required or what is required by the city at 20%. So we've been able to, based on square footage, more than double the affordability here and make sense of it. You know, a concern of ours, you know, with this program of dividing the affordability from the market rate is we really and truly want to maintain a sense of this is one community here. And, you know, the way we think we can achieve sort of the cross-pollination of that community or buildings to buildings is we're going to share in all our ground floor amenity space. So if you live on the left side, you're free to come over and use all the amenities there and vice versa. So we do believe we can maintain that you know, socialization of this site to operate all as one. And the site plan itself, I think, is indicative of the fact that, you know, this isn't going to look, feel, or operate like two separate developments. It's all going to be integrated as one. As we move forward with the architecture on these buildings, we're going to be very focused that from the outside looking in, you're not going to know the difference between the two buildings, so they'll be of similar quality and integrated nicely. And you know, that I think is the key, you know, component here that, you know, I'm just putting out there, you know, right away, in case you have questions, concerns, and you know, any comments or advice you could, you know, offer us all to achieve those goals. And I think
Yeah, I can get into the landscape now, Robert, if that's okay.
yeah, and again, on the landscaping, we're excited, you know, another benefit of no parking on site is, you know, we have complete freedom now to have more green than hardscape if we so choose, which I think is, you know, an amazing flexibility here as we advance, you know, the site design of the project. So go ahead,
I can pick it up from there. I think a couple of things to notice about the project. You can see, and we can share this presentation. You can see the spot grades along Broadway climbing elevation, you know, 28, 30, 31, 33, 35. One of the first things we did is we set the elevation of the plaza at 33, and we made all three retail spaces that face it be at that elevation. So that's after a lot of work to understand the repercussions of that, moving toward the Sewell Street properties, moving to the Grant Street properties, that seemed to be the right datum, which means that you can very smoothly move in from the sidewalk and cut across. Also, this is a diagrammatic indication of what's a very subtle slope that drops down to 28. And then the park design that I'll show you some diagrams in a minute includes strategies for grading the park so that you can move very easily from elevation 28 almost without noticing the grade change down to elevation 22. So that's the kind of single movement I've been talking about. This is the shared amenity space. It faces this courtyard. If you live in these buildings, you can exit here and make your way directly there. There's a community space that has relatively high ceilings. It's unprogrammed at this point. It's designed to be the element that, in a way, defines the Sewell Street Park and is seen as an extension of it. And I think that we'll be using this group to help think about what that space wants to be. It has its own independent entrance that's separate from the circulation within the building itself to mean that it's truly a space for the community. And then in this section of the building along Temple Street, we have a kind of arts and creative business space of between 750 and 800 square feet that we're also starting to think about in terms of programming immediately adjacent to the bike parking, but also immediately adjacent to the lobby as well. The yellow spaces that you see in the plan are ground floor residential spaces that will, increase that lively mix of the ground plane, which is very important to us. One comment about the bike parking here is that one potential strategy is that piece of land you were talking about across from the food bank, that skinny extension of the property might be the perfect place to have an open space, but also a pathway that leads directly to the bike parking. And so that might be the bike parking garage to provide access for the people that live on that half of the site. I'm now going to drill into some logics about how we're thinking about the open space relative to grades and the use of that open space. We've done a little bit of design so far, but we've really been thinking about the logic of the space, the open space in terms of activity zones and how they contribute to each other. You can see the elevation 33, which is the elevation that cuts through the plaza. This is the Muse. The idea is the Muse would include a very gradual slope, but stairs that might lead directly down, and then garden buffers that would be both an amenity for that pedestrian walkway, but create some kind of buffer between the ground floor units and the kind of public path that cuts all the way through. We're imagining all three retail spaces, which again are at elevation 33, would spill out in nice weather. We're thinking probably all those spaces are food and beverage tenants who would be best at kind of activating the space. And so we've set up kind of zones we're imagining tables and chairs would be set up, again, weather permitting. And then a skinnier cafe spill out zone, maybe just one table deep along that building face that's nosing along the top, allowing for access into the courtyard for people in the larger community that are using the amenity space, for example. And so this just helps us kind of, before we get into the actual decisions about the landscape, just be very clear about cross circulation and the issues we have to think about. We're working with Jesse Barkhan and his team at Graffito. They're excellent real estate consultants who specialize in placemaking and kind of retail concept thinking. I'm in a way a spokesperson for them tonight, but the general idea for the retail, again, is to focus on food and beverage, but local operators, new concepts, recruit BIPOC-owned businesses, and this might include graduates from Bow Market who have very tiny spaces there that might want a slightly larger space because of their proof of concept there. And so this is the spirit of the retail, and the retail is being thought of very much as a placemaking strategy, as much if not more than a source of revenue for the overall development. And so you'll be hearing more about that. We've designed the retail so that it's relatively small, but there's flexibility in the final footprints based on finalizing tenants and the precise amount of space they're going to need, especially along the Broadway edge. There's a little bit of optionality there, but not much because the retail floor levels have to step with the grade. And then the plaza adjacency is going to be a home run. We think it's perfectly scaled, and if we get the right three retailers there, it'll be an active, lively, welcoming place. You'll see in a few minutes that we're starting thinking about the tenanting of the retail space and the landscape architecture, and even wayfinding, signage, and public realm programming earlier than most projects do, even earlier in a way before we start designing elevations and getting into the architecture with specificity, because getting the program mix and getting the character right is super important for this project. These are just some touchstones of local retail that we visited, kicked the tires, talked about a little bit the vibe we're after. In terms of the retail we're imagining will line the plaza and extend a little bit up and down Broadway. We're working with an awesome landscape architecture firm called Future Green from Brooklyn, David and Lois, and this is some of their past work. The character and the sensibility of their project, when we were researching and talking to landscape architects we might work with, seemed perfectly suited for what we were after. In particular, maybe the images on the left side of the slide. There's something thoughtful about their work in terms of dimensions, seat walls, but a sensibility that combines, we think, plantings and hardscape in ways that aren't too corporate looking, don't look too much like out of the box, and I think will distinguish this project from other mixed-use residential projects of a similar scale that have been developed recently.
Tim, I'll say, going back to those photos, although I'm not a drinker, the beer garden photo, I mean, it's the kind of, for me, that's the inspiration here for the retail to create a gathering place and the energy that will really draw people in and enjoy this public space. And to me, it's the most exciting part of thinking through this development.
That's right, and all of the decisions we've made about lobby entries, door locations, getting the grading right, thinking about the view corridors as you move from Broadway and you kind of turn into this space, what it looks like from across the street if you get off the bus. These are all, we've been thinking about the project conceptually, almost cinematically, about how spaces unfold as you walk through and navigate the grading. So it's really important. The other thing is that we've become kind of students of Beau Market and have been thinking about the scale and dimensions of the main space there, how the retail we provide here can be differentiated from Beau Market, but maybe take advantage of some of the entrepreneurial successes that come out of there. So that's something else we'll probably pick up on some more when we get into a little bit further along with some of our decision making. This is an overall kind of landscape diagram that sets up the possibilities of the landscape. As I mentioned before, the plaza and the park are bookends. The Muse Gardens are that connection. That blue arrow through the middle of the site is the public connection. And then because we have to kind of mind our business along the residential properties along Grant and Sewell, we're being very careful about the grading along those edges and how we plant and terrace those edges to get from level 33 down to low points that are like at 18. And that even at 33, there's a lot of territory we have to cover and resolve to get it to work. I think also somebody mentioned the stormwater concerns. The good news with the parking not below grade is that we have many more locations now to deal with stormwater on site and even deal with stormwater from the uphill side as it's making its way down the hill mid-block. In an earlier version of the scheme, we were using the Muse Garden, the subsurface area of the Muse Garden, as essentially a kind of stormwater cistern. But I think that we'll expand that strategy now that we have more places that are terra firma than before. The Pocket Plaza inspiration, which is the plaza facing Broadway, I think we see it with a very careful planted and hardscape balance. We don't want it to be too dry and hard. We want to encourage some habitat to occupy the space too, birds and we want the ambiance when there's seating outside or public seating to include both lighting and the plant choices we make to create, in some ways, a kind of oasis along Broadway too, a place that people naturally gravitate to, even if they're not going to be, going to one of the cafes or restaurants. And so I think the image on the lower left in particular resonates with me as maybe the kind of space we want to create. And so that, I'm bringing this diagram up again, but we can also use the planners in a way to help navigate some of the grade conditions. You see again the stepping grade along Broadway, and then the ways that we can, in a couple of places, get down to 33 and use that as a way to also add some plantings to the mix. As for the pocket park or the Sewell Street Park on the opposite side of the project, we see that feeling much more like a park, really green space with paths in it rather than hardscape with planting areas. We want to have natural play structures for kids that are both a visual amenity and also invite a sense of play. We might use the grade change there to have a natural amphitheater in part of it, but we want enough space there that the community can gather informally, and we'll start to figure out what size of a crowd, for example, might fit in different park configurations. This is the diagram that we're favoring now. Again, just diagrams. We haven't gotten into design yet, where at the end of the muse, there might be a stair down to the park on the right, and then branching off from that, a very gradual connection that gets to the Sewell Street sidewalk that wraps around that green space in the other direction, with different planting and programming possibilities around the edges. So that's the diagram we're thinking about. We can also make a connection directly from Temple Street, where this arrow is, to get directly to that park, and you can see how the community space fronts the park and will become part of the design of the park as well. So I think, Robert and Rachel, that's what I have. So
Thanks, Tim. So Rachel, should we open it up for some back and forth?
Absolutely. So for all the members of the committee, this is a little tricky in terms of if a lot of people want to speak at one time. We don't have a raise hand function on GoTo, which is one of the challenges here. So what I might suggest is if folks could, if you are speaking, if you don't mind trying to turn on your camera, just so we can see visual cues a little bit of who's jumping, who wants to jump in next, so that folks we can sort of get to everyone as we can. And I see a note in the chat from someone to kick things off. Oh, great call, Councillor Wilson. So maybe why don't we try that? Try with the chat first. So indicate in the chat if you have a question, and then I can call on you, and folks can, you don't have to say it, you just have to say comment, as Councillor Wilson just did, and then I'll kick the microphone to you. So Councillor Wilson, do you want to kick us off? You just noted your interest to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to say thanks for this presentation. I also want to take time to acknowledge that you're sort of, if not leading, you're bringing in the landscape architecture earlier than a lot of developers often do. Oftentimes it's an afterthought, and it's so good to see that not the case here. I think it's going to really benefit the project, and yeah, I want to express appreciation for that.
Thank you, Councillor.
And Tim, we are still seeing your screen. If you'd like us to or not, let me know.
Oh, this is a whole new, I think I can stop showing screen. I can pull it back up if people have questions. Am I now out?
You are, yes.
Yeah. So this just exceeded my ability to manage different things. So, okay, I'm good.
Will, why don't you go next?
Thanks. I really appreciate seeing these proposals in such detail, and I want to thank you for I think the pretty deep consideration of what is the feeling that we're going for in this community, and what's the vibe that we're looking to create. I note that it's pretty different from some of the other newer developments in Somerville in what I see as a positive way personally, particularly using using Bow Market and kind of similar areas as inspiration. I think that's a great idea. I have the question I have is around the properties that are not part of this plan that are on the corner of Temple and Broadway. I'm wondering what your thought process has been with respect to those two properties, and you know, how this would interact with those being in such close proximity, and how these designs might change if the status of those properties were in scope or out of scope here.
Well, I think I'll address that first, but I'd also like Josh to weigh in, because, you know, what happens out there impacts, you know, where Josh's buildings are going to be built or building, depending on where we land here. But, you know, in my opinion, I think the opportunity there, we don't control that property. We just, you know, it's just not part of our proposal. But I do recognize it's under the purview of the urban renewal plan that's been approved. If the city were so inclined as to, you know, get control of that property, we think it could just add a tremendous amount of value as an additional public space that could be programmed, and we'd be happy to talk about, you know, taking on, you know, some of the responsibilities cost-wise that come with that programming, because, you know, we see it as being integrated into the overall here, if that's the path the city were to were to take here. So Josh, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, but we've talked about it before. And, you know.
I would just reiterate, you know, what I think we've heard from Tim and Robert. This is an exceptional site, and the site plan that's been prepared, we think is just a fabulous improvement in addition to the built environment. And so forging ahead with what we've got is the way to go. And I think there's flexibility should that corner turn into something else someday. But right now, you know, Mark Development has done an incredible job getting a difficult site under agreement, and you know, we're just excited to forge ahead with it.
You know, Josh, I guess one thing is, I think about this that we may want to consider, and this is for you as well, Tim, is if that's the path that ends up happening here, we may want to think about, you know, that front facade on
Yes.
On Josh's building and how it
Being a future front, right?
Yeah. So it may alter, you know, how we think about the architecture of that facade.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that the small parking area we're maintaining behind the liquor store building, as we call it, is controlled by Mark Development, but that's going to be a kind of hardscape that will allow for limited parking for the businesses on the front, but also is a kind of staging area for loading for some of our small retail spaces too. But that can be that can be a well-designed kind of multi-purpose hardscape. It doesn't have to be, you know, the ugly parking lot it is now. And I think the future of that little parking lot, which is on this development team side of the line, and the private parcel that faces the corner, could have alternative futures. It could be an open space, it could be an arts building. You know, I mean, there's a couple of it becomes a small parcel to imagine as a
How about like a mini district hall that you
exactly
see?
Which might be a better use than open space because of its prominence on the corner versus but it's not very viable as a redevelopment site because it's so small. That's the challenge with it. But
yeah,
I think
1,000 square feet, which
yeah.
to give you perspective is probably similar in size to the open space on our project facing Broadway.
But I think, Will, I think this means we should probably look at it. So thanks for your question. I mean, I think we should look at alternative futures just so that make sure we're making good decisions now, I think is the point, right, Josh?
Right, and that gets to actually the heart of my question. So maybe I'll rephrase it a little bit. I think you've mostly answered it, but I'll just put it out there anyway, which is I'm wondering how I'm mindful of the time that it takes to go through a process to obtain that parcel, and whether or not that ever will happen is of course a question. I guess I'm curious about your thoughts around, I guess you could say, order of operations. Like, would it drastically change the plans that you presented today if you knew that was available, or as compared to if that's something that became available for redevelopment further into the future?
I think if we knew what were happening today as open space, then we would come up with a definitive design of that facade that faces the park, so that it kind of works as the front door, more so for that building than on Temple Street. But I do think there are ways to design this for that flexibility in the future, where, you know, it can be an added feature if that were ever to happen. I don't know if you disagree, Tim, or have other thoughts on that, but I got to believe there's a way we can think
Yeah,
about.
I think we need to treat the end of that building, you know, even today as something that's visible, even up over the existing buildings. But, you know, I wonder if in the future that wants to be an open space or a kind of a special two-story building there too, because we should be careful that we don't want an open space that dilute the activity of the two open spaces we already have from a kind of density of population standpoint. It's more to program, but I think both options are good, and I don't.
I think what Bill's sitting on, though, is, and it's a fair point, is if it were part of this development today, and we knew that definitively, I think we would bring that building up to the street and decrease its size in the rear in a way where you have additional open space in the back that perhaps ties into Sewell Court, you know, that park down there. That might be the best.
What we would do, yeah. Slide it up, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, Robert and Josh, it's worth coming up with a scheme where we, you know, we've got the scheme that we have, and we look for the most interesting possible solution in a way that is retroactively completely satisfying, right?
Yeah, the only hesitation I have, to be honest, is, you know, we've obviously designed around that property. I know the owner because I met with them. You know, initially I did want to include it in the overall, but they are clearly do not want to give that property up, and I don't want to agitate my neighbor. You know, it's a little sensitive and tricky, so I hesitate about creating designs now to excite people where, you know, that building would have to be taken sooner rather than later. Right now, we have very good relations, and I'd love to keep it that way if possible.
That's good to hear, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness on that. Of course, you know, these are people's businesses and homes we're talking about, so it's a serious matter, but certainly one worth considering in the context of such a large change to the community.
Have a quiet group.
So my apologies if I missed something, and also just recording this for anyone who might follow this meeting later. My internet has cut a couple of times now, and it was telling me that it may have cut pieces of the audio. So I'm trying my best to take very good notes, just in case it missed something important that one of you said. I just want to note that for anyone who's watching this later.
Would you like to have the conversation again?
I think it's okay. Will can correct me in the notes if I missed something.
I could dub in
Sure.
pieces, Rachel.
But let's see. So anyone else who might have thoughts? Counselor?
Sorry, it hid my unmute button on me. I just wanted to follow up and just encourage you all, if you haven't already done so, to talk to Public Space and Urban Forestry before you go before the Urban Design Commission. It always works out better that way if you do that.
Okay. We will.
I think it's a good point now that we have terra firma too, Robert. You know, there's a whole other kind of discussion we can have about tree canopy and
Rachel. Yeah, Council in there. So just since I have you all in front of us here, Robert and Adam and the team, I'm going to continue to be repetitive around a couple of things. One being, how do we come to some sort of binding agreement around the park on Sewell in perpetuity, and how do we discharge that other lot? I know it's jumping ahead, but I have to just say it because that is my most pressing need. I think you all are being extremely thoughtful and did a great job. The only like real standards or desires I have for that I've heard from the community through the years, besides they just want something there, is that this is why I'm saying I'm not so picky, but you've hit the mark with the plaza in the middle, somewhere where you can get off the boulevard of Broadway and be able to just enjoy a beverage or whatever it is. The carry through to the park, so you've listened and you've hit all the marks, a lot of the marks. But because we had this other opportunity with the eminent domain, it's always been I'd be remiss not to bring it up. That basically, like, how do we, if you're going to deed that lot to the city, or we're going to purchase it from you, like talking about the smaller one, and then as far as the park goes, how do we get an MOU that it will be accessible to the public in perpetuity? And I have other things too, but those are kind of like two things that stand out to me that I haven't really been able to talk. I haven't talked to you all in a bit, and I usually let the community talk in the bigger meetings. But so those are two things that I really kind of want to address.
Sure. Great questions, Counselor. And listen, we have no philosophical difference here. I think the small lot on Sewell is an easy one. We've always anticipated we're subdividing that off as its own separate lot, and it's going to be deeded to the city, for $1. And as it relates to the public space on Sewell, we want it to be what we're designing in perpetuity. So I'd leave that one up to greater minds, legal counsel within the city to suggest how best you'd like to get those protections. But I don't think you'll have any resistance from us, or I know you won't.
Okay, and then thank you for that, Robert. And then the part that I kind of skipped over in my jumbled mind, it was the thing I said about sort of standards and expectations. I think you all have heard this already, but again, I as the counselor and as somebody who's talked to thousands of people on the doors, I just want to reiterate, that the Walgreens is definitely going to go to the other spot. I think that's great, Robert, that you have those relationships and you've been able to shepherd this thing, because that's really important to the community. So I'd like to, I know, whatever, hopefully we can get some sort of really good assurances. And then the other piece is like a food source there. I know the way it's laid out, maybe a smaller type food space. I know that it's not necessarily going to be, a Whole Foods, but people have generally expressed a really sort of strong feeling and opinion that there should be some sort of food source there. So those are the other two pieces.
Yeah, I mean, we totally agree with you on the market to the extent we can attract one, a local type market. You know, this is smaller scale here, but you know, it'd be a fabulous amenity not only for the community but our residents. So we're definitely thinking alike on that. It's just, you know, I can't guarantee that we're going to find somebody. All I can do is set this deal up financially, which I've maintained from the very beginning we are doing, in a way where we can attract locals and, you know, charge probably what is going to be a below market rent. And we have a healthy budget, one that's greater than you would typically see on a project pro forma like this for tenant improvement dollars to finish out the space. So we see the retail, you know, it's not a place you make money here. It's, you know, if we can break even on the retail, we see that as a win. What's first and foremost here is getting the right mix and setting them up for success. And that's been the premise all along. And I'm sorry, I forget your first point. That was unrelated.
Oh, just about Walgreens.
Oh yeah. I mean, that, not to pat myself on the back, but that in my previous life, I developed about 200 Walgreens from Philadelphia up all the way up through New England. So that's one of the benefits, you know, having us as a developer here is it's the relationship, long-standing relationship I've had with that company. And, you know, I'm glad you bring it up because it sort of lights a fire under me to check in with them because it's been a while, but I can tell you I have a signed, you know, term sheet, you know, that lays out the terms of this deal, and they're totally on board. It took us some time to educate them on the urban renewal plan and what that could potentially mean to them. And I structured this for them as a windfall because we're, as part of our project development, going to supply Walgreens with $800,000, which is the amount they gave me that it would take to refixture the other location. So, you know, it takes us out of the urban renewal equation and it gets them sufficient dollars to go relocate. And the biggest thing that happened, and this was just pure luck, but when I reached out to them on this, you know, it was probably like back in July of 21, it was kind of like, oh my God, you know, it's a good thing you reached out to us because the existing lease up the street that they were still carrying, even though they relocated here after they bought Rite Aid, was coming up for renewal at the end of August of 21. So we caught them just in the nick of time because they were not intending on renewing that option. And once I brought the awareness to them, they did exercise that. So I know they have that long-term control up there still. So the stars were kind of aligned on that piece of the deal.
No, and that's great. I'm only bringing it up. I'll bring it up repeatedly just because people have said to me, because like, you know, that all sounds so good to be true. It's like, wow, you know, Walgreens is really going to move. You know, I mean, like, people are skeptical is all I'm saying. And so like, I know you can't, you know, as far as assurance goes, I mean, just.
Hey, if you, Counselor, if you ever wanted me to arrange for, you know, like a three-way call, the two of us and a representative from Walgreens, I'd be happy to do that if you think it'd be helpful for the community.
I would, you know, just being in this group here, I would leave that decision to the entire CAC. So that's the body that we're, you know, assembled as now. I think I personally think that would be a good idea. You know, just for a quick little thing. But the other thing I was gonna say, last thing, was that when we talk about the food source, like is it labeled as such on those plans, like where that location would be, potential food source, so that people can see that it's been built for the possibility of a food source, but you can't guarantee it, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own ideas of where it would fit best. I don't see it as a space that we want to have occupy a large part of the frontage of the plaza. It's probably more appropriate to have frontage on Broadway. So if you want to put up the site plan, Tim, we can kind of identify where I think that space would be ideal. But of course, if a grocer said it was important to them to face the plaza, I'm sure we could be flexible with that as well.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, I'm getting good at this. There you go, Robert. Is that good?
Yep. Yeah, that's the one
sorry.
with the square footages.
Yeah.
So, the opportunity here really, if they're not going to be facing the plaza, you would, that right there, but we would carve off the piece that dog legs towards Sewell Park. Yeah, like that. And what's remaining, which looks to me probably to be about 2,500 to 3,000.
That's right.
To me, that's the ideal spot.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then that piece you cut off would be where the food establishments would go.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could move that line a little bit too, based on getting into specifics of layout.
Okay, that's all the questions for me. Thank you so much.
If I could add one piece on the market element, one of the things that our team in economic development is starting to research is different models for nonprofit grocers. There's a nonprofit grocer operating out of Central Square, the Daily Table, and I think someone actually brought that up at one of the last community meetings. And so we are working on looking at that model and then a couple of other models. I was able to visit one in Oklahoma a couple of months ago that was really interesting as well. So we're going to explore what those models could look like and see if there's ways to support that.
Great. Any idea of the square footage on the one in Central Square?
It's pretty small. I want to say 3,000 to 4,000 roughly. It's not huge, but they have a lot of material. And there's a case study on the one in Oklahoma that I can send as well along to everyone assembled, and I'll put that in an email.
Yeah, there are models of spaces this big that have a cafe on one end and then grocery on the other. It might be one combined space too.
Yep. That could work nice.
We have just about 15 minutes left. Are there any other questions from members of the committee?
Is somebody muted that has some really loud stuff happening?
Andrea, you're up, and I'll figure out the muting.
I think it's Michelle on her phone. She can't find it. That's fine. That's fine.
And so actually, Michelle, do you have a question first while you're unmuted, and then we'll go to Andrea?
No, I don't. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Oh, I didn't know you can hear me. No, I don't have any questions.
Okay. We will go to Andrea.
Hey everyone, this is Andrea. I work at the Welcome Project down the street. We're an immigrant advocacy organization. Something that concerns us a lot is that a lot of our constituents are getting displaced, and that's no surprise to anyone here. And I think it's great that you forged this partnership to provide more affordable units. That's really great. I'm wondering if you could clarify like why, because I think you mentioned at a neighborhood meeting that it's more difficult to integrate the units, the affordable and market rate into one building, and exactly like what mechanism it is that that makes it so challenging.
Sure.
Yeah,
Josh, I think that's certainly for you.
yeah, Andrea, I'll field this one. So the issue when we're building affordable housing in this way is that we're accessing varieties of funding that are specifically for supporting affordable housing, and lenders and investors who are geared up specifically for this sort of affordable housing transaction. And so trying to build affordable housing in conjunction with a large market rate component, or even with retail. And so in what Beacon and Mark Development have been talking about, the retail component, though there'll be some in the affordable housing buildings, will likely have separate ownership, because our lenders and investors in the affordable housing world really don't want to be involved in the funding and financing of things like ground floor retail, things like market rate units. And so for purposes of having this separate financing and investing that goes along with affordable housing, it really makes sense to have these buildings separate.
Josh, as strange as this might sound, if I were to ask, and sorry to put you on the spot here, but if I were to say to you, for some odd reason, the city is insistent that instead of being 100% affordable, they'd like your building to have 20% market rate units, I have a feeling you'd say, I can't do it, right? I'd say
Yeah,
that to prove the point you're trying to make.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Robert. You know, the market rate units in this sort of affordable housing transaction end up, you know, while it's true, you get more rent for them, which means you can support a bigger mortgage. Our investors are focused on the low-income housing tax credit, and additional market rate units does nothing to increase the equity investment in the deal, and it actually, in fact, turns off a lot of the investors for the credit. They're just not interested in taking market rate risk. And so for us, an all affordable deal is really the best way of building a lot of affordable housing at this site.
And then I'd go further to say, to help clarify this overall dynamic, is that, and then if you come to us, the market rate building, and said, we really need you to do 20% affordable, we'd say, fine, we can do that, and we understand why you ask. However, what that would mean to us is we would have to ask Josh to take on more of a burden of the land cost than he currently has agreed to. And if he does that, if he had to do that, then his deal falls apart for an entirely different reason, which is he has to pay too much for the land. So it's an interlinked dynamic here for each of us.
Yeah, thank you for answering that question.
No, it's complicated. It took me some time.
It sounds really complicated. It's just concerning that we're still we're physically separating and segregating people by what happens to be the income that they make. And this is probably like a state policy affordable housing question or concern kind of thing that has to be changed. But my other question is what kinds of steps have you maybe started taking or are thinking about in terms of first source hiring and job opportunities that could come out of the development, and kind of equitable access to those jobs, which is helpful for people to make, good incomes and to be able to stay in Somerville.
All right, when you speak to jobs, would that be on the construction side specifically, or?
Sure, like, yeah, construction and in terms of the commercial, the retail spaces.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
project labor agreements, yeah.
Well, on the construction side, I'm going to say that, we need probably sometime soon to bring on board a chosen general contractor, to help us shape that model. There are probably ways to set standards here where we're encouraging through the contractor in requiring a certain level of locality as it relates to those jobs. But I hesitate right now to throw out percentages or any agreement on that until such time as we bring the contractor on board, which should happen. We're just getting our feet replanted again after discovering we couldn't have underground parking and bringing Josh on board. So we're soon approaching that time. So I would suspect sometime over the summer, early fall, we'll be much better prepared to have that kind of discussion. And then on the retail side, I mean, I think what we just put out there earlier about having a lot of local flavor, if not 100%, brought into this development speaks for itself. I would think that with these local businesses come local job opportunities as well, particularly in the immediate neighborhood. I think drawing employment from the immediate neighborhood would be important for this project due to its lack of parking. So those are my general thoughts. I know I'm not sharing specifics at this time, but I am giving you my thoughts. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're just thinking about like if there's going to be, the diversity hires, like in Boston, they have the certain percentage of BIPOC, local resident, and women.
Yeah, I left out, I'm sorry to interrupt, a major piece of this discussion. We have signed up a DE&I consultant called CAGE, K-A-G-E. They're a firm that helps. Our company has recently taken on as part of its mission. It's very important to us, DE&I. And, they've been brought in to our company, not just specifically for this project, but holistically, to help us navigate with DE&I. So I think it will be very enriching and helpful, I think, as we continue to talk. Maybe at our next meeting, we can have a representative of CAGE here as well to speak to you.
Sure, that would be great. Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Andrea, I would add that from construction work we're doing in Boston right now, Beacon has a bunch of tools and experience as well for working with RGCs and making sure that there's a high utilization of local residents and minority and women work hours, along with minority and women-owned business enterprises as subcontractors to the GC. So something that we want to be sort of pushing the envelope on and doing as much as we can.
So we have just about 5 minutes left. We do have a member of the public who had a question that was submitted in writing, so I wanted to get to that too, but I just want to do one last call for members of the committee. So the question we had in writing, I can read, and then I'll also give a moment for our members of the public to speak if they would like. So the question we had in writing came in from Sean Desmond, and it was, are there any front runners for commercial tenants?
I wish I could say yes, but honestly, we haven't even been out there yet, sort of pitching this development. It's just way too early. I mean, when you think about it, we're talking, 3 years out from now, and it's hard to create enthusiasm and secure commitments and bring people in this early on. But we'll be engaging, and, I think we have the best in class, helping us with that, and Jesse from Graffito, who will also, as I'm sure we're going to have many more meetings. And, I'm sorry tonight we don't have the full team assembled, but, next meeting we'll be bringing in a more comprehensive team membership here, including Jesse. I think you'll be impressed with Jesse.
Are there any additional questions from the members of the public in attendance this evening? If you have an additional question, you can raise your hand or type it into the chat. Okay, and seeing none, for
Could I
the
ask
committee
a
member,
question before we
of course.
stop? So I'm delighted that you've established this CAC group, sort of to be representative of the community to interface with us. So I'm just curious to know whether are we going to have regularly scheduled type meetings as we go forward, or is this just the city deciding when as needed, or how do you generally deal with the CAC group?
Yes, actually, we'd want to check in with the members of the committee about this. Beacon Properties and Mark Development have made themselves available to come to these meetings, and I did just want to check in with everyone about how you all feel about them coming sort of every month or every other month, or what's the sort of rhythm that you think would be most productive to the conversations.
All right, we can let you all discuss it. I just wanted to make it clear we feel the more the better, just so because development like this is constantly, evolving, right? So the more we can stay engaged with one another, I think the better the project will end up being. That's all I have, Rachel, if you're waiting.
Okay. No, that's okay. I was just going to see if there are any members of the committee who want to respond.
I can say something. I think we lost
Michelle.
Rachel. Sorry. Can you hear me okay? Or
jump right in, yes, of course.
Yeah, so thank you for mentioning that, Robert.
Yes.
I think it's really great that you all are making yourselves available to speak with us frequently. I think, like, personally, it could be helpful for you to join at least part of our meetings. Be there for a part of them.
Okay, great. And they're held monthly? So you're on mute, Rachel.
Yes, monthly on the second Thursday of the month, 5:30 to 7.
Okay.
Maybe if I turn off my video. Can you hear me now?
Yep. So we'll see.
Okay. So yes, the meetings are monthly at the.
Go ahead.
So we'll plan for having you all back next month. Items we did not get were to talk a little bit more about our survey outreach. And so what I will do is send you all an email with sort of our plan for how we could do this and some suggestions on some tabling times and places based on the feedback from all of you last in March. There was some feedback from everyone about places to set up tables, and a few folks volunteered to be participating in that effort. So I'll send an email with some ideas about how we can do that. But I do think one of the things I picked up on tonight was that given the nature of the corner relationship, it sounds like we probably do have more time to have those debates around what the city wants to do with those pieces, and if we want to pursue a renewal. So I think what that does is that means we have more time to sort of divide our attention and focus really on the details of this project and that survey that we've been out there, because to the member of the public who asked the question about, commercial tenants, I think that's where we had started as a group. The last couple of months is really energizing the community to really give good feedback about what they'd like to see, so that this team can go out and do some searching.
So will we have the survey results in advance of the next meeting?
We will have some results. The survey's been out there, but it is really just starting to be out there. It took a little while to get it translated, and so we have not done full sitting out there with the survey at key locations yet.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have Jesse with us nonetheless at next month's meeting. So I just want to say thank you to everyone. Pleasure meeting all those people I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet. And we look forward to working with you, hand in hand. We truly approach this as though this is a public-private partnership, and we see you as partners. So look forward, and it never has to wait a month. I'm easy to reach. If any of you want to reach out for individual conversations, all my contact information, including my cell number, is on our company website. So just look us up and feel free to call. Otherwise, we'll see you next month.
Thanks for your time.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye.
So for our committee members, if there's anything else, I can stick around, but if not, we might be able to call it there for the day.
Thanks, Rachel, and thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate all the great comments.